Hi, everyone. Jonathan Lashley here. I'm the Academic Technology Program Manager for the Idaho State Board of Education. I work directly with faculty, staff, students, and leaders at all levels to develop new collaborations and alignment between our academic operations. This is work that faces all of our colleges and universities. We have four two-year institutions, four four-year institutions in Idaho. And it allows me to coordinate from the state level conversations about open education, online learning, and this work originated previously when I was an academic officer for the state, overseeing academic policy implementation and improvement with our institutions. And at that time, I also chaired Idaho's General Education Committee and the related board policies. Uh, Important to know, in Idaho, the State Board of Education, our policies have the force and effect of law in many cases. And so there's a lot of gravity to state level policy as it relates to education. And as a effective and responsible and ethical public administrator, especially one who touches on policy, is that despite my leadership roles, I'm always an educator first. Throughout most of my career, I've been a part-time adjunct at colleges and universities where I've been an administrator, and that's true here as well. I currently am a general education adjunct for the College of Eastern Idaho. And so what I've seen over the last 8 years being back in Idaho and working in state level conversations about open education, about policy, is that policy is a really important tool to sustaining open educational practices. And policymaking, like any political process, should really originate from and engender effective practice, in my opinion. Like any good political effort, there's always good tools and idioms that exist across a number of different disciplines. One that I've always gravitated toward, especially in recent months, is this three-step process about educating, agitating, and organizing. So in step one, when we educate in policy development, we are teaching stakeholders about effective or desired open educational practices. When I came back to Idaho, I didn't know who else was doing this work related to open education, but I knew other people had to be. It couldn't have just been me. And sure enough, there were instructional designers, online education folks, faculty, librarians, student leaders who all had stakes in this conversation. Maybe they just weren't connecting. At the state level, there was a CAO, chief academic officer, as well as other agencies that had dabbled a little bit in OER, but the conversation was not unified. And so not only was it important to connect with all of them, get a common language, get common definitions in place, but also use that conversation as a mechanism for bringing other folks in and getting a sense of if and where people might find a common cause or common interest around open education. The next step, agitate, meant we were critically analyzing and challenging related policies or priorities at our institutions and state levels. And that's if they existed in the first place. And so it was really key for us to assess what already existed, where there might be additional resources or support or funding, and basically to set up a baseline understanding of what was possible in our state with the resources that we had at our disposal. And then finally, the step three is once we've sufficiently educated the coalition, once we've agitated the status quo, then we organize, we develop or we revise policies to set a reliable floor of support for boundary standing. And I think it's important that we think about policy in terms of setting a floor instead of setting a ceiling, because the ceiling sets a arbitrary roadmap to generally conclusions that aren't going to be sustainable or valuable long term. Whereas if we set a floor of baseline expectations, then what happens is we make space for all sorts of new practitioners in working with their colleagues, working with students to try out new educational practices that may be more open, that may be more affordable, that may yield more agency to learners and faculty alike. And effectively, that's what we've developed from a policy standpoint to support open educational work in the state of Idaho. We have a board policy III.U, educational access and affordability, that is not an OER or open education specific policy, But what it does is it organizes the work of open educational practices by adopting common definitions for relevant terms and by expecting every participating institution to have a plan to make sure that faculty and students have the support, the recognition, the resources that they need to pioneer new boundary crossings in open educational practice. And at the end of the presentation, there is a reference to this policy. I encourage you to check it out. And if any of you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I look forward to talking to you.